Bless you. I'm Elect Lady Prophetess Owens, and welcome to another Elect Ladies Corner. As we have often heard the story of King Saul, the first king of Israel, we are reminded of how he was later rejected as king by God. Saul started out as a meek man, very unassuming and not feeling worthy to become Israel's king. But once he had a taste of power and fame, his humility and dependence on obeying God lessened, and he fell into half-hearted obedience. There are at least 5 signs to watch for in half-hearted obedience. Number 1, you do not acknowledge you're wrong but pretend everything is well. You become confrontational when confronted by authority for your wrong. Number 3, you blame others for your wrong. And number 4, you come up with excuses to justify your wrong. Number 5, pride enters in, and you're more concerned about what people think than God does. As we rehearse the story of King Saul, we find all these signs in his half-hearted obedience during his reign. God spoke to the prophet Samuel to give King Saul instructions in 1 Samuel 10:8. And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down to thee to offer burnt offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry, till I come to thee, and show thee what thou shalt do. But when Saul felt he was in a crisis because his enemies had surrounded him, and his soldiers had scattered in fear, Saul half-heartedly obeyed. He obeyed partially by waiting to the 7th day, but he didn't wait until Samuel came. 1 Samuel 13:8 says, And although he was not a priest, Saul offered a burnt sacrifice to the Lord. He should have been obedient and waited for Saul, no matter how long it took. But verse 10 said, And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. So we see the 5 signs of half-hearted obedience in Saul's behavior. Number 1, he greets Samuel, but does not acknowledge what he did wrong. Number 2, when Samuel confronted him for his wrong, he accused Samuel of not doing his part. Number 3, he blamed the people for scattering from him. Number 4, he gave excuse that the Philistines were coming to overtake them, so he had to force himself to do the sacrifice to get God's blessing. Number 5, out of pride, being the king, he took upon himself to step into Samuel's authority. The story ends with God taking the kingship from Saul and transferring it to King David. Again, we find King Saul in another half-hearted obedience when Samuel instructed him in 1 Samuel 15, verses 2 through 3, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he had laid wait for him in the way, when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Now that's about as plain instructions as you can get. But instead, look at how Saul responded in verse 9. But Saul and the people spared Agag, king of the Amalekites, and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refused, that they destroyed utterly. Again, we see the 5 signs of half-hearted obedience. Number 1, Saul did not acknowledge that he was wrong. He greets Samuel with flattery and then says to Samuel, I have performed the commandment of the Lord. Number 2, when Samuel confronted him, asking him, What is this noise of sheep and oxen I'm hearing? Saul responded, We kept the best of the sheep and the oxen for a sacrifice to your God, and everything else we destroyed utterly. Number 3, when rebuked by Samuel, Saul blamed the people for keeping the best of the spoils and sparing King Ahab's life, when previously Saul had already erected a monument in Carmel in his honor before Samuel ever came. Number 4, then Saul's excuse was the pressure of the people caused him to disobey, and he should not have allowed them to persuade him. Number 5, lastly, pride kicks in when Saul pleaded with Samuel to make a positive appearance with him before the elders of Israel and the people to pretend everything was well with them. But sadly, this is the final rejection of Saul as king, and Samuel never saw him again until his death. So remember, it doesn't matter how well you started, but it's more important how well you obeyed. So please, I adjure you, beware of half-hearted obedience.